Leaders at the G20 summit in Brazil's Rio de Janeiro have issued a joint declaration calling for a global pact to combat hunger, more aid for Gaza and an end to the wars in the Middle East and Ukraine. The statement also called for a global tax on billionaires, but it did not offer specifics on how to achieve those goals. The summit continues today. Leaders are expected to focus on sustainable development and the transition to clean energy, with the world on track for its warmest year on record. For more on this, I'm now joined by Tobias Scholz, Associate at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. Now, what's your take on the start of this summit and this rather lofty declaration?
Yeah, well, I guess this declaration is, first of all, a good message for everyone who's still keeping up the fight against poverty and hunger in the world. I think it was a smart move by President Lula to choose one topic and not to go with a bucket list of different subjects, which was oftentimes the case over the past years. However, of course, we have to ask the question, what kind of legitimacy and authority does the G20 have in these times to eradicate poverty and hunger? The G20 are composed of several nations who are in conflict with each other, who are opposed to each other in several international crises and conflicts. So kind of implementing this declaration will be very difficult going forward, specifically considering the elections in the United States, where Donald Trump will certainly not go forward with the policy that President Biden has pushed for, who signed this declaration.
Now, the declaration is focusing on hunger, poverty and taxation of billionaires. It condemns the wars in Ukraine and Gaza without naming Russia's aggression and the terror organization Hamas being responsible for the war in Gaza. Is that acceptable?
Well, that depends of which of the member states you ask. Of course, for Western leaders coming to Rio, it was a declared goal to have the war in Ukraine and Russia's aggression being named in the declaration. For other countries, it was more important to have a clear stance on the war between Israel and the Hamas. And I guess what the President Lula in Brazil wanted to achieve is to keep international conflict out of the declaration. That is something that Indonesia and India in the past 2 years have tried to do as well. And they have succeeded with this. And one reason why these G20 presidents could achieve this is because Brazil, as well as India and Indonesia, are currently seen as international swing states. And it is more important for countries like the US, Germany, but also China to accommodate these swing states in the international system than to push too hard on having certain clauses included in the declaration.
Now, many of the problems that were mentioned there are happening in Africa, for example. Now, the African Union is now a permanent member of the G20. Do you think it can shape the bloc's priorities?
Well, we will see this in the next year. South Africa is taking over the G20 presidency from Brazil, and the next summit will take place in South Africa. So probably Lula is setting the scene here for following up with this eradication of poverty and hunger agenda. But whether the African Union can really be a political player, that will very much depend also on their internal cohesion and union within the G20 bloc. And of course, it will depend on the support of donor countries within the G20 bloc, how much they are willing to support the efforts which were included in today's declaration.
Tobias Scholz there from the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brazilian President Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva has called on the world's biggest economies to improve their climate goals. The targets aim to cut emissions of gases that cause climate change. The Brazilian president made the call on the second and final day of this year's G20 summit in Brazil. Lula da Silva urged rich nations to bring forward their targets to achieve net zero emissions by 5 to 10 years. Developed nations have historically emitted the biggest share of greenhouse gases, which are driving climate change. Well, our chief political editor, Michaela Küfner, is at the G20 in Brazil. Welcome, Michaela. It's now ended. What did it achieve?
Well, it clearly sent the message to those rich nations, and it says it in the statement, that in future trillions, not billions of dollars, will be needed to help particularly poorer countries tackle climate change and live with its effects. There's also clear language in there that the inequality, not just within countries, but also between countries, is responsible for the key challenges of our times, and not just climate change. And there's a clear call for more of a stake in international institutions, although there also is a recommitment to those very institutions that are set to become challenged once again when Donald Trump becomes US president again. So clearly, overall, I can tell you, we heard a much louder voice from the up-and-coming powers, including the world power China, but also from India and particularly Brazil, who made it a deliberate choice to put hunger, poverty, climate center stage and not let this G20 be overshadowed by the imminent war in Europe, Ukraine, but also in the Middle East, that conflict between Israel and Hamas and Lebanon. And that is quite a telling sign. No longer are these conflicts the key issue everybody is talking about. They are somewhat of an irritant in actually getting big problems solved.
Well, at the risk of irritating the Brazilian president, let's talk about the Ukraine conflict. Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, was there at the G20 talking about Ukraine's use of ATACMS. What was he saying?
Well, he was saying that this was essentially creating a new phase in the war. Russia, he was actually blowing hot and cold. That is something we've seen time and time again from Russia. We've seen an adjustment of the nuclear doctrine of Russia in direct response to that, which makes it easier under that doctrine to use nuclear weapons. And at the same time, we heard from Foreign Minister Lavrov that he would do everything he can to avoid a nuclear war. So it's a threat, while at the same time trying to send the message that Russia is really merely defending itself, a narrative it has been working on since it attacked Ukraine out of nowhere. Also, interestingly enough, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz drew praise from Lavrov. He called him very level-headed and considerate after Olaf Scholz sticks with his refusal to send long-range missiles, the Taurus system, to Ukraine for the very fear that it could spark an escalation with Russia.
The Russian foreign minister sounds like another leader who is about to be disappointed. Back here in Germany, there is talk that Chancellor Olaf Scholz's SPD party might remove him as Chancellor candidate in the forthcoming elections. Tell us more about that.
Well, he isn't formally the Chancellor candidate yet. It did raise a few eyebrows that his very own Social Democrat Party put that gathering where he could be crowned the Chancellor candidate into mid-January, with elections happening on the 23rd of February. It's a very interesting one. It seems like the Social Democrats seem to be tearing themselves apart once again. They have somewhat of a history in doing that. And Olaf Scholz left the country here to Brazil firmly in the driving seat, but he's actually coming back to a fight, a grassroots fight, but also within the upper echelons of his party, which is insisting that Olaf Scholz is the man and not Boris Pistorius, who's the current defense minister, who was appointed by Olaf Scholz, who's actually, he's the most popular politician out of 20 in Germany, and Olaf Scholz just reached place number 20. So any pollster can tell you who's the more likely candidate. The only hitch there, Boris Pistorius is actually in favor of sending more weapons, including potentially the Tower system, to Ukraine, and that is deeply unpopular within his own party and with large parts of the German population. So figure out that one, but it looks like Olaf Scholz is up for a fight there.
And to think people used to say German politics is boring. DW's chief political editor is Michaela Küfner there at the G20 summit in Brazil.